Okay, that's one way to do it. There are much nicer ways to do it, which you put them all in nice ordered way. So what you do, you're very patient. You start off with the first layer. You make a nice layer of close packed layer. One layer of ping pong balls, so that everything is touching each other. You fill that layer, then go to the second layer and build up, and keep on doing that. Nature actually prefers this kind of an arrangement. You can have atoms and then put them around and then they can all arrange randomly, which we would call as a glass or amorphous material. But in many cases it turns out that, it's much more preferable that the atoms arrange themselves in a nice ordered fashion. Okay. Next slide please. This is like how we arrange oranges, for example, or apples, right? Whenever we have equal size things, how you stack them. Okay, atoms stacked together. How are solids formed? How is copper solid formed? By stacking together copper atoms. It turns out that if it forms an ordered arrangement, that's what is called as a crystal. Okay, you might have or might not have studied about crystals. In any case, this ordered arrangement of things is what is called as a crystalline material. Okay, so the same copper. It turns out that some elements, nature puts them together only in one way. For example, this is the best way to do it. So, and this nature says, okay, I'm going to go with only this particular way of arranging it. For some other elements, it turns out that nature can arrange it in two different ways. Both are ordered arrangements, but the way it is ordered is different. Okay, for example, can I go to the previous slide, please? For example, you have iron. Right? Iron, all of you know, is never mind what is detailed are, okay? So forget about what it actually means. It turns out that iron can be put together, atoms of iron can be arranged in two different ways. One is what is called as a body-centered cubic, other is called as a face-centered cubic. Never mind the details. Okay, just names. Very importantly, same atomic number iron, same everything. If you put it in the body-centered cubic arrangement, it is magnetic. Same iron atoms, when arrange them in a face-centered cubic arrangement, it is non-magnetic, completely non-magnetic. So you see, it's not only the atom that is present that is important, but the way the atoms are put together, the way they are arranged, that's also important. Okay, so now we are talking. So now we have things that, okay, intrinsic property is important, it decides lots of things. But if you can also force, for example, iron to arrange one way or other, we can make it magnetic or non-magnetic. In many cases, we want to make stainless steels and other things which are non-magnetic for various applications. Okay. Then what should you do? You should force iron to arrange itself in the non-magnetic way rather than in the magnetic way. If you do that, then you can be sure it's non-magnetic. Okay. So we can do that. That is the whole point. Okay. We can change the properties of materials by forcing the atoms to arrange in different ways. Okay. Next slide, please. The next one. Okay, this is a very beautiful and classy example of this kind of thing what happens. What we have here are four different materials. Are they different materials? Of course, I told you it's the same material here. What are all these things? What is diamond? Graphite? Some fancy form, fullerene and nanotube. What are all these things?
Carbon.
Just carbon, just one single element carbon. Nothing else.
Arranged in different ways, yeah.
The only difference is their atoms are arranged in different ways. When you put carbon, arrange carbon with this so-called diamond structure, it is the hardest substance that you have. And when you put it in the graphitic form, it is among the softest thing. That is what you use in pencils every day. Right? You know your graphite, lead you call, right? It's not real lead, it's graphite. Okay, pencil, black color thing. So soft that when you write, it actually starts peeling off and then it easily impressed to the paper. That's how you basically write. Okay, same material. And then you can actually coax it to form into much more complicated structures with even more interesting properties. Okay, so this tells you the dramatic range of properties that you can get from the same single atom just by arranging it differently. I hope somebody is keeping track of time. I will go on forever otherwise. Somebody is keeping track of time? Anyway, so let me know when I have to stop. Okay, so let's stop. Anyway, when did we start? What time did we start? 11. Okay. So let me know when you're bored. I'll stop. Okay. Fine. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So this is what your graphite looks like. It has these layers of carbon. It's a covalent bond. All of you know covalent bond, at least you know. And the bonding between the layers is what is called as van der Waals bond. It's very, very weak. In plane, within the plane, it's very, very strong bond. Between planes, it's very weak, which means that these layers can very easily slide one past the other. That's what it acts like a lubricant and so on, right? Sometimes it's used as lubricant. Like oil, right? Things can slide past one another very easily. Okay. More interestingly, when you start peeling off this layer by layer, you can end up with what is called as graphene, which is just a single layer of carbon. Okay, and you can end up with a Nobel Prize for doing that. Okay, you have heard of graphene? 2 years back, Andrew Geim and Noah Sloan, they got the Nobel Prize for, not for just making this. Imagine how they would have done this, how they would have got a single sheet. Very, very complicated method. You take graphite, put a sellotape and peel off a single layer. Can you imagine anything more simpler than that? Okay, so the point is, it's not the how expensive equipment you use or what you do. It is the idea that that's something can be done. More interesting thing is, if you make a single layer, it behaves completely differently from the bulk form of carbon. Single layer of graphene, carbon, right? Just like diamond and graphite are very, very different, right? In terms of properties, when you make a single layer, it's completely different. It gives you a range of host of properties and it's used for many, many applications. Therefore, it's very interesting. Okay, you can also take a single layer and allow it to make it into a tube. You can take a piece of paper and fold it to form a tube, right? To form a cylinder. You can do it at atomic level. You can take a sheet of carbon and allow it to fold. You can take a sheet of carbon and allow it to make it a buckyball, football. Okay, it's called as a buckyball. So these things can actually be made in the lab. And each of them shows some very, very interesting properties. Okay, so the point is just a simple material like carbon. The way things are arranged can give very different properties. That is important. This is again, I will relate this to nano again. Okay. The important point is that when you have a lot of atoms and you put them together, they will show certain properties called bulk property. Okay, which means thousands or not thousands, 10 power 23, right? What is 6.93 in 10 power 23?
Avogadro number.
Avogadro number. What does it mean? Number of species in 1 mole. Right? So you have multiple things. A drop of water contains several 10 power 23 molecules, for example, right? Same thing, keep on reducing the numbers to, for example, 1000, 100, 10, right? Then you see that the same material, as the number of atoms are reduced, now it will start being very, very differently. Just for a similar reason that we've been talking about. Because your bonding and everything will start changing. Next slide. Okay, so these are two very nice examples of how just the arrangement of atoms changes their properties. Never mind in detail. This is one form of iron which you put together in ordered fashion. Body-centered cubic is magnetic. If you arrange it in the face-centered cubic same atom, it becomes non-magnetic. Similarly, you can have a soft lubricant to a very, very hard material just by changing the way in which your price also goes slightly higher. No? Diamond versus graphite, right? Diamond is slightly more expensive than graphite. Anyway, so, and you don't want to wear the graphite necklaces anyway. Anyway, so next slide please. Okay, so what is this? Thermocol. Everybody has seen it? Why am I showing this? Any idea? Anyway, so I'll tell you, okay. We started off with atoms. Okay, and it told that you want to put atoms in an ordered fashion so that you form large things that are periodic. That's called as a crystal. If you take any material, for example, I take iron from here, right? This is some steel, right? If I take all the atoms, how this is arranged, is it that all the atoms from this end to end are all arranged in the same fashion? They are not. Okay. What you actually have is local regions within the material where all the atoms are arranged in a certain fashion, and adjacent regions also, in that region also they are arranged in the same way. But the orientation between these two things are different. For example, if you have for example, this assume this to be a cube. I have atoms arranged in this cube in this particular fashion. Adjacent cube, they are arranged in a different way. Okay, these things are called, each one is a crystal, each one is called as a grain. Any real material has what are called as grains. Okay, within a given grain, all the atoms are arranged in a uniform way, just like I told you, right? Nicely ordered. Between adjacent grains, the orientation is different. For example, one may be here, or the other may be here, so looking at multiple grains. So any real material is like thermocol, and these individual things will be like your grains. Take this piece of iron and polish it nicely and look at it under a microscope, you will see the grains, different grains. Okay. So next slide. So this is the third level of organization from atoms. We went to unit cells, how these are arranged, and then we are putting together multiple unit cells. Okay, it turns out that there are lots of defects, all kinds of things that can come about. We saw that the property can be controlled, decided by the atom, and then next by how the atoms are arranged together at the small atomic level. When you come to much larger level, this for example is the what is called as the electron microscope image of the real material. This is not thermocol, by the way. It exactly looks like thermocol. Okay, and each of these things here is like a grain. Any real material will be like this. You can go and look at things in the microscope. Okay, so the point is, and the size of this thing, grains can be changed depending on how you have treated the material and so on. So once you put these things, obviously you know that now, even though you have, for example, let's assume it's copper, even though you have copper here and everything is arranged here, now you have regions between these two grains that are very different. Because here they're arranged nicely, here they're arranged nicely, but this is a defect. At the place they're joining, right? These are called boundaries. Okay. So the third level of complexity that we introduce is that these defects that we have in materials also control the properties. It turns out that no material is ever, it can produce ever defect free. All the things that we draw in textbooks and things like perfect crystal, there's no defects sort of thing, right? It's all ideal situation. Real materials always contain defects. And the bottom line is that the defects control the properties to a very, very large extent. We can change the properties of the materials by changing the nature and the amount of defects that we have. How do we do that? How can we change the, how do you think we can change the defects in a material? And you just take a guess. I have a piece of copper. Okay. How can I make it more defective? Keep beating it, what do you think will happen? You got to introduce, you come with ductile, deform, all kinds of things, you will introduce defects. Okay, you can change the shape of the material, you can do all kinds of things with copper. So you can actually introduce defects artificially. If you look at a computer, okay, if you look at the inside of a computer, right, it contains all these different kinds of materials that you have together. You have metals, you have oxides, all kinds of polymers, you have all different kinds of materials all put together in a certain fashion to serve a given function. Right? A computer has to work in a certain fashion. It works in a certain fashion because you have controlled how the materials are put together and what are the specific defects that you have in these materials. Okay, so it is very difficult to go in more detail than this at this stage because you have to know lots of other things. But so I just leave it at that. So three things are important: atoms, how the atoms are put together, and the defects that you finally get out of them. So this is the three keys. So this part, the first part is basically called as the structure. Structure is basically what is the atom and how they are put together. The second level of organization where you have defects on this is called microstructure, where you have put multiple things together to form. Okay. So the structure and microstructure both can be controlled by, next slide please, what is called as processing. Okay. How are different materials made? For example, I asked you about the Coke can, right? How is the metal made there? Beating, you basically roll the material. The fact that you roll the material will cause different kinds of defects in the material. Okay. You can melt the material and then change its shape. You can do all kinds of different kinds of things. The whole thing is basically called as materials processing. Okay? So we can process the material by different ways and change its microstructure and therefore its property. So all the material scientist does is worry about structure, microstructure, processing and properties. These are the only four things that are there. And how they are related between each other. Okay, these are only the four things. Is that clear? Any questions? No? Okay, so now we come to nano. Okay, so far we looked at materials. Okay, so this is important to understand what are we doing, where are we doing. It turns out that by suitable processing of materials, we can make the size of the order of nanometers. What is a nanometer? Nanometer is something of the order of 10 power minus 10. It's very, very small. It's few tens of atoms across. What is the typical diameter of an atom? Anybody knows what the diameter of an atom is? 11, 12 people you should know. Hydrogen atoms are studied, right? 10 power minus about an angstrom. Typically of the order of an angstrom. What angstrom? 1 angstrom is, 10 power minus 10. So it's smaller than a nanometer. 1 order of magnitude smaller than a nanometer. Okay, so it's very, very small. So the point is that by suitable processing of materials, there are lots of things. Length scale, when you talk of lengths of materials, right? We have ants, which are of natural world, it's of the order of millimeters. Human hair, what is the thickness of human hair? It's of the order of microns. Micron is 10 power minus 6. This millimeter is how many meters? 10 power minus 3. 1 millimeter is 10 power minus 3. This is micron, 10 power minus 6. We are going 1 order lower, 10 power minus 9 is when we start getting molecules and other things. These are that are available in nature automatically. We can also make things artificially in all these length scales. We have a pin, right? Regular pin of the order of millimeters. We can make things smaller than that. We can make carbon nanotubes. I showed you an example of carbon nanotube, right? Those are of the order of nanometers. Okay. So both in the natural world and in the man-made world, we can make things at various length scales. Okay. And it turns out that when we start making things that are very, very small, their properties dramatically become different. Carbon, as we take as an example, when it is in bulk form, it behaves differently. We make a nanotube out of it. The property completely changes. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. Definition of a nanometer. This is from some professor from Stanford who defines it as, all of you know what DNA is? Double strand CH sort of thing, right? DNA is about diameter of DNA is about nanometer. Very, very, very small. Okay. 10 times diameter of hydrogen atom. 1 hydrogen atom, if you have 10 hydrogen atoms, that's about a nanometer. So it's about how much your fingernails grow each second. Okay, you can measure it if you want. Obviously you cannot measure it. This is an average. Okay. And there are lots of other things. Smallest Pentium chips and all those computer features that you have, right? These are of the order of 10 nanometers. This is a definition of what a nanometer is. Next slide. Whenever we talk of nano, sorry, how many of you have seen this person or know this person? Richard Feynman? Yes? So among the foremost physicists, Nobel Prize, of course. So he did lots of things, quantum electrodynamics, lots of other things. But anyway, one of the interesting things, he gave a talk in one of the conferences, and he was asking these questions about. This talk was titled as "Plenty of Room at the Bottom." Okay. It's available on the internet. So if you go and download it, you can read about what he was talking about. So he asked questions like this: why cannot we write the entire 24 volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica in the head of a pen? Can we do that? Okay. It turns out that it may be possible to do that. So what is the problem here? Question is, can we actually make things that are smaller and smaller so that we can compress whatever is possible on a large scale into something which is very, very small? This is the beginning of nanotechnology. Nanotechnology is the ability of making materials very, very small and using them for various different things. Okay. This is 1959, remember, when this was not called nano at all. So, this is the first beginning. So we have to ask two questions. Why is nano interesting? I will show you using some examples that the same material, when we had a large form, when we make it much smaller, properties become dramatically different. Okay, that's one thing. Of course, properties can become different, but the important thing is how can we make nano? We can say that okay, if we make it, then it becomes different. But it's also important to know how do we make nano. I will briefly tell you about how we can make nano. Finally, if we make something, we will be able to see it. Okay, so how can we see nano? This basically by using electron microscopy. Okay, so I'll very briefly run through all these things and then. Okay, it's a very nice example of what happens when you make things into nano. Let us take a 1 rupee coin. Okay, again, don't try this at home. This is a thought experiment. We break it. Okay, into half. Quarter. What are we doing at every stage? We break it and then now measure the surface area. What is the surface area of a cylinder? Bias matrix is not the surface area to volume. All of you know that, okay? 2 pi RH plus 2 pi R square, whatever. So, if you now break it, okay? Now we created, you cut it into half, let us take. Now we created new surfaces. You calculate the new surface area again. Break it into 4 times. Calculate the surface area. Keep on doing it such that approximate weight of this thing is 1 gram and approximate surface area you can calculate. Okay, find out the diameter of a 1 rupee coin, find out the thickness, you find the roughly order of magnitude is the surface area. Now if you make it, if you break it, make it the powder, smaller and smaller and smaller, at every stage you calculate surface area. You make it into particles that are 1 nanometer in diameter. Okay, same 1 rupee coin, you are not adding any new material. And you find the surface area, you find that it's increased 1 million times. The surface area, 1 million times. 1 million is how many? 10 power 6 times. Okay. If you are able to spread that out, if you have a ball and cut it out and make it into a flat thing, right? You put all of them together. The new surface area will be as much as the thickness of Mr. Debra from 1 rupee coin. You can imagine how large that surface area is. So much surface is available in that small amount of material. Okay. So you can imagine how large a surface area that is. From 1 rupee coin, they are getting such a large surface area. So the important point is that if you take a 1 rupee coin and find out what are the number of atoms in the surface with respect to the total number of atoms. Suppose there are like 10 power 23 some atoms, you will see only a very small fraction of the atoms reside on the surface. Okay, but when you keep on cutting and dividing, and making it smaller and smaller, it turns out that the surface area becomes dramatically different. And therefore, we now have a new surface area which is much larger. When we have most of the atoms residing in the surface, obviously the properties of the material are going to change. Okay, and therefore, the same material when we make it small, now behaves very, very different. That's one small example of what property changes because of doing the small size. Okay. This is property what, for example, when we want to make a hard disk in a computer. Okay, each of these things, your information is stored in these bits, and you want to make them as small as possible. If you have seen pictures of computers before, right? They used to fill these whole rooms, and their storage capacity will be much smaller than what you have in your mobile phone that you get these days. Why is that? Because they could not make things, storage elements that are very, very small. Now with the new nanotechnology that is possible, you can make this bit, as it is called, much, much smaller. Therefore, you can pack much more information in a much smaller area. As an example I told you, right, you can enhance this by a very large extent. So this is one example. I'll just run through examples, okay? This is an example. Nano, as I told you, I showed you this example of optical property. Okay, beautiful glass things that have different colors and so on. It turns out that People knew how to make these things. Nano is not new at all. People have been making nano, they didn't call it nano. Okay, have been making nano for centuries. These beautiful stained glass windows that you got here, it turns out that it has these nice gold and silver particles, which are very, very small, and they give these colors. People exactly knew if you heat it to this temperature and pour the glass, you're going to get this color. But they did not know at that time what was actually giving rise to the color. But they perfected it like as an art form rather than as a science form. But now we know where these properties come. Next. So take gold, bar of gold. Okay, it has golden color. All of you know. Same thing I told you. This thought experiment. Right? You make gold smaller and smaller and smaller, and it's floating around in a solution. It looks nowhere like the gold that you started off with. Now it looks like a pink juice. Right? So this is gold juice, if you want to call it. Very expensive juice. Don't drink it. But color, the point is the color changes completely. When you make gold particles very small, so that most of the atoms are sitting on the surface, the optical properties of material, it's no longer opaque like this, the color changes. Okay, so this actually Faraday did this long back. Michael Faraday, who did many things, physics, chemistry, many fields. Okay, so the optical property changes. And so, next slide please. I think we have only a few more minutes left, so I'll just quickly summarize the remaining things. The best nanotechnologies, where do we learn how to make things nano? Okay, nature of course is the ultimate nanotechnology, if you want to call it. Okay, this is an example of a human, of a bone. Bone is basically consists of two components. One is what is called as collagen, one is called as hydroxyapatite. You must have studied this possibly, right? Collagen is a very soft, squishy material. You can put a hand, it will squish. Hydroxyapatite is a brittle material, more brittle than papad. But the point is that when you put them, both of them together, and the fact that we're able to stand here, it is able to support load, carry loads and things like that. This is a remarkable thing. When you make things in the nanoscale, put them together, it gives a material with a property which is far greater than the sum of its parts. Okay, so that is the beauty. So we can often get properties that are much better than the sum of the individual components that it's made up of. And our inspiration, of course, is nature. Okay, anyway, so next. So how do we make nano? I will say this and then make a couple of minutes. I'll conclude. I had lots of other things, but if anybody is interested, the slides are available. You can look at it. Okay. How do we make things the nano? We can think of it in two ways. One is called top down, other is called bottom up. Top down is like what a sculptor does, right? You take a large piece of rock and then remove away things that you don't want, and you end up with something that your sculpture, right? So you can start with a very large material and then remove or break it down so that it eventually forms something of the size that you want. That's called a top down. The other thing is start from the atoms. Don't start from something very big. Start from the atoms and put them together so that you stop it when it goes to the order of nanometer. This is called as bottom up. It's like children playing with the sand in the beach, right? You take grains of sand and put them together to build castles. Okay, so these are broadly the two ways by which you can actually make nanomaterials. Start from something very big, break it down to make it small, or start from something atomic level and put them together to make this. Okay, in both these cases, you will end up with a material which shows some very interesting properties. Okay, I had several examples, but I think I will just run through. I'm not going to talk about details. How does the gecko? You must have heard stories of Shivaji army, climbing forts and things like that, right? Using some gecko. How does such a small lizard? How does it have an ability to carry so much load? Okay, that is an inspiration for many people. It turns out that the gecko has legs that are or features that are very small, often going at various sizes, going to the size of nanometer. That is why it is able to actually form such strong bonds. The important thing, remember, you should also form strong bonds. You should also be able to remove easily. You can have a nice Fevicol sort of adhesive, and then you can stick the gecko with it, but then it's not able to move anywhere. The beautiful thing about the gecko is sticks very well, it also removes very easily. So that combination is something very, very beautiful that nature has made. So people actually have made, inspired by this gecko leg, using nanotechnology, they made things that can stick well and remove also very, very well. Okay. This, by the way, was done by the same person who discovered graphene. He called this Friday science experiments. They used to have fun, do all these kinds of interesting experiments. Friday night when they had other, they want to do serious science, for example, and they came up with this kind of an architecture to do. Anyway, so go on. Next slide. Okay, so I had one slide to say that Bhagavad Gita also talked about nanotechnology, not directly, of course. This is what are called as Bhagavad Gita. In one of the verses, it says that one who does all work as an offering to the Lord without greed and attachment is basically like a lotus leaf untouched by water. Why is the lotus leaf untouched by water? Okay, it is what is called as a super hydrophobic surface. Okay, hydrophobic surface is one that is not affected by water. It turns out that the structure of the leaf, next slide. Anyway, I had a movie, we'll skip that, you can go to internet and watch this. Next slide please. It turns out that the lotus leaf has small protrusions. Okay, that doesn't allow water to stick on the surface and therefore water rolls. Again, it's related to the fact that the same material, we're able to structure it, make it into very, very small, in the order of nanometers, and therefore it's going to Next. I'm just running through these things because people have been making wood raincoats and umbrellas with this property. Obviously, right, we don't want to get wet in the rain. Then you want a material where water will just roll off, will not stick and then enter. Only then you will get wet. Right? So that BASF, for example, is a very famous German company. And they have been actually making fabrics and wood and things like that, where water will not stick based on this kind of a property. I told you about the blue morpho previously. Again, it's related to how the wings are structured. So we were able to structure things on the order of nanometers with interesting properties. Peacock, beautiful colors that you see. It's again another illustration of nature. All of the inspiration basically we derive from nature. Nothing we are doing is original. Okay, most of whatever we do is just inspiration from nature. We're trying to mimic nature, trying to do at least a little bit of what she can. Anyway, so hummingbird again, different examples. You can make opals. Go on. I'm just running through these slides, okay, because we are out of time. I will show you what I have, and then if there are any questions about anything, I will be happy to answer. This was an example of magnetic properties, how magnetic properties can be changed when we go to nano. Next slide, please. I had again had a movie. You can download this. I have given the links there. Okay, you can go to that particular link. Bacteria, okay, naturally of the order of things, can have what's called the magnetotactic bacteria. It can actually search for food. It uses magnetic nanoparticles for motion as well as for finding food and so on. So it is actually existing in nature. Next. I think that's more. Anyway, go on. Okay, anyway, so that is what I just had. I just had a quick it's not an exhaustive list of applications. Nanotechnology, of course, you hear the term everywhere nowadays. But the important point to remember is that the bottom line is that materials have intrinsic properties that we can control in a certain way, and when we make them, when the materials go to the size of the order of nanometers, several often new and unexpected properties come about. And that is what nanotechnology is all about. Our ability to make materials in the nanoscale, to study these properties and use them for various applications. Okay, so I hope this is just a very, very brief introduction. And we are not even touched the surface, so to say. There's lots more to understand. Nanotechnology is not something which is unique or different, or you need to do courses to understand it. You study your physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics, whatever you are doing in your classes properly. If you understand that properly, then you can already claim that you have all the tools necessary to understand what nano is about. Okay, I'll stop here. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you. Okay, thanks.